Hey everyone, Ian here. Inspired by Dan McClellan, here is today's fit, Naruto for Love. So today's video is a pitch to Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast about a new Forgotten Realms inspired video game that I would like to pitch to them. With the success of Baldur's Gate 3 and Helldivers II, I would like to pitch the idea of a video game that I really, really wish existed today. And I think, if you give it a chance, I think many of you would as well. So let's dive right in. So the premise of this Forgotten Realms game is based off of the end of a 2-year campaign that my friends and family and I played from May of 2020 to April of 22. So it's 97 sessions over 2 years. It's Dungeons and Dragons 5e, set in the Forgotten Realms, a setting, as those of you who follow this channel closely, is near and dear to my heart. In Stolen Sunrise, the campaign culminated in a crusade into the Shadowfell. We had to unite the Northwestern world, the famous Northwestern world, which includes famous cities like Neverwinter, countries like obviously Waterdeep, right? And tens of thousands of soldiers and spellcasters, the likes of which had never been organized, so far as I know anyway, in the Forgotten Realms. And essentially a permanent, think of like Deep Space Nine, where there's like a permanent wormhole, right, that connects the two quadrants of the galaxy. In Stolen Sunrise, there was a permanent portal to the Shadowfell, which is really, really rare, if not almost impossible, but it happened in our campaign. So this crusade into the Shadowfell is the basis of this video game I'd like to pitch to the luminaries at Hasbro and Wizards, especially because there's, with the success of games like Baldur's Gate 3 winning Game of the Year, I'm sure an appetite to massively expand their portfolio of games in there. As a matter of fact, I know Wizards alone has a half dozen studios working on a number of these topics. So let me go ahead and pitch this game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to describe the combat, the role playing, some of the live service elements, but first let me tackle the premise. So let's briefly describe, just for folks who aren't totally familiar with the Forgotten Realms as a setting in the Shadowfell, what exactly the Shadowfell is and maybe is. So the Shadowfell is a different plane of existence, right? So when you play standard D&D games in the Forgotten Realms, this usually takes place in what's called the material plane. So think about Earth today. As we walk around, that's called the material plane. Something like hell or heaven might be considered, in our world anyway, different planes of existence. And so too is the Shadowfell. The version of Shadowfell that we know, I guess, in the modern era of Forgotten Realms storytelling was more or less facilitated or created by Shar, and ultimately is a dark, twisted kind of echo of what exists on the material plane. So take a really famous city like Neverwinter, for example. There is its sort of dark counterpart on the Shadowfell called Evernight, right? I actually got there to go there in the campaign. It was really, really cool, really interesting. So there's this entire extra plane of darkness, of sadness, of despair, where a lot of many different myriad dark lords, entities, creatures, but also, and very importantly for this video game idea, civilizations, factions exist strewn throughout the Shadowfell. So importantly for this game, there are what is called in the Shadowfell domains of dread. So probably the most famous is Barovia, where the infamous Count Strahd, it's his domain, right? It's one of the great legendary vampires in the Forgotten Realms history. That's his domain, as an example. So there are many, many others, and what I ended up creating that I'm going to show you on this video is, so far as I know anyway, and I created this, I want to say, in February and March of 22, so if it existed since then, keep me honest in the comments, but there was no really contiguous, complete map of the Shadowfell. So using a phenomenal, super cool, that I couldn't recommend more highly, tool called Incarnate, I ended up creating a map, and I'm going to show it to you here. Essentially what I did, and this is not necessarily completely canon, but it does serve as a really great basis for this video game. This map essentially concatenates all of the domains of Dread together like a map in a 4X video game that you might be familiar with. So take, for example, Age of Wonders or Total War Warhammer. You have your overland map, you have your cities, factions, borders, but also in certain cases, and this is really important for this game, points of interest. So that is ultimately the main background for the game. But there are three components of the game that are going to make it, I think, a transcendent experience for those of us who love this world. And that is the combat, the role-playing opportunities, and how the live service elements enmesh with one another to then create what could be a really special gaming experience. And the reason why I'm covering it on the Story Together channel is a collaborative story experience. And that's where I think Helldivers 2 has been absolutely genius in inventing not necessarily a new genre, but a new way for the community to attack problems together. So let's dive right into, first let's start with the combat, because I think that's what everyone, at least initially, is going to be the most interested in. So again, our crusade has landed through the portal, and we're just starting out. If you look at the map here, and we have sort of just started the process of exploration, right? So, you know, I'll bring it up so I can see it, but you guys will see it on your screen too, is we start at what I canonically call the center, which is Mount Ravin, right? But around Mount Ravin, there are other civilizations like Markovia, there's Forlorn, Montross, and close by is Barovia, right? So essentially what you're going to be able to do is, let's say that, you know, in the Helldivers 2 context, where, you know, you select, oh, I'm going to go fight on Meridia, and here's my mission. You might have a mission with you and your party to go to Forlorn and investigate the Wailing Oak in Forlorn, which is near the city of Cassiar. And there, in order to get to the Oak, you might have to fight, and what combat might be like. So here's the frame of reference for how I think combat should exist in this game. And there's two historical examples that I really want to use first. So, obviously, Helldivers 2, in terms of the party context, not necessarily stratagems, but that fluidity and cinematic nature of combat. So put that on one side. And then in terms of how you marry that to what we now think of as 5e combat, which is turn-based, highly tactical, where's the intersection of those things? And there's two games that I want to start with as really good examples. Number one, Dragon Age 3 on console, I thought did a really good job taking what could be complex fantasy combat from anything from sort of martial classes to spellcasting classes to more stealthy classes and everything in between, and allowing you to do that in a mostly fluid way on console. And another game is much more old school, but it's in the Forgotten Realms. As a matter of fact, you actually go to the Shadowfell, and it's Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2 on console. Phenomenal game from my childhood. Obviously one of the last of the great couch games. So if you kind of look at those three games together, it kind of proves that you can have a 5e Forgotten Realms experience in fluid, real-time combat rather than the sort of Baldur's Gate 3 tactical, turn-based, much longer. So we want it to be real-time, we want it to be fluid. So let's say, you know, you're like a level 4 wizard, you've just unlocked Fireball, right? That could be like L1 triangle, if you've mapped it that way on your wizard. Or if I'm my favorite class, a Vengeance Paladin, right? And I got my level 2 Smite queued up, you know, that's like L1 square. Whatever it is, there are really innovative ways that you can take the core elements of classes that we now know of, you know, like Fighter, Artificer, Warlock, whatever it is, right? You can map the real-time abilities, I think, in a pretty effective way. Now, obviously, you're not going to be able to capture everything those classes bring to the table today in a 5e, but you can customize core elements, I think, that would be really fun to play. And you could even do like Diablo-esque skill trees or talent trees, where you could create, like if you're a wizard, for example, evocation versus illusion, different schools of magic, right? There's different ways to customize your classes so that in combat scenarios, your party of 4, right, would be really potent forces depending on how you customize it, right? And you know, obviously you want your traditional DPS and somewhat of tanking and damage, but there's really interesting fluid combinations of how these classes might work together. Druids would be a really interesting class to play in these scenarios, right? And obviously what you're fighting are the monsters that would live in the Shadowfell. But the really cool idea is because each of these highly unique, or each of these domains of dread are really, really unique, right? Like the monsters, their intrinsic abilities, the bosses, right? In Barovia would be really different from, you know, Harakir, which would be different from Darkon, you know, different from Sarados, right? It would be very rich, like in Helldivers, where there's different planets and different types, different weather patterns, you know, like I think of firestorms and Hellmire, maybe not that, but you know, things like that strewn throughout that are highly dynamic and highly unique to each of these domains of dread, which would really make them a fascinating you know, intersection of this game. So if I'm fighting Strahd's army in Barovia, and you know, the army, right, in the live service senses, and that's where we're being deployed, right? I can imagine if you're fighting in the forests of Barovia, that'd be just profoundly different than the mind flayers up in the northeast in the mountains. I mean, there's just so many different things. I'm fighting the pirates over in Saragosse and the boats. I mean, it would just be super fascinating how your party would enmesh in combat with those guys and their abilities. And there's just so many different types of monsters you could choose from. I can only imagine that would just be awesome in the different terrain. I'm looking at my notes here, you know, their enemy powers and the bonuses. I mean, the boss fights and the culmination of this, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the live service side, would just be, I think that'd be special if done appropriately. And lastly here in the combat is, unlike Helldivers 2, I really want this game to double down in loot. And I think that is part of why a lot of people play, myself very much included, is the loot. I mean, I remember when I played Baldur's Gate 2 for the first time in 2000, and I was a paladin, and I got the Karsamir after we defeated Furkrag, the Red Dragon, and I identified it, and I was like, Jesus Christ, that's Jason Bourne.gif. Like, I was really, really, really pumped about it. And I think everybody has had, that played D&D in any significant way, has had those types of experiences. So as you're winning these major combat encounters and getting rewards, and in a second, investigating with role-playing, points of interest, I really want a unique, high-quality set of items, equipment, magic items that you can then continue to leverage in combat and role-playing scenarios. I think that is what's going to help set this game apart. And I'm not talking about like in the traditional Ubisoft, you know, you have 30,000 of the same type of item, no hate or no shade intended, but more that these items are special, that they're unique to these areas, right? And that they give you really interesting and cool powers, abilities, both in combat and role-playing. And of course, aid the army in their effort, right? So in general, that's how I see combat playing out. I would be on that every night that I could, even though I'm a grown man with kids and a beautiful, wonderful wife. I would be missing for a couple weeks if this game existed, from a combat standpoint anyway. All right, let's transition to role-playing. And that's where I think this game is really going to differentiate itself from the Helldivers 2 context, because obviously there's not a lot of role-playing outside of the emotes and saying for democracy, which is really fun. But I think D is exemplary in its role-playing, and I think that's where a lot of us fell in love with it. Right, so let's look at this map again, and again, you know, let's shift around to not necessarily let's zoom out, and actually I can show you some other things about. By this way, this map is intensely mediocre, so I'm sure there are those of you that would create some infinitely better versions than I. But if you just zoom out, and you can see all of these different domains of dread. And actually the story that we were playing, if you see here in the bottom right, is the reason why we were going on this absolutely ridiculous crusade in the Shadowfell, which is unprecedented and overwhelmingly difficult, is the story of Stolen Sunrise is that if some of you are familiar with the Time of Troubles, which is kind of the basis for the story infrastructure of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, where the gods were forced to walk the earth because they weren't doing their jobs. In this case, Shar and Lathander, so Shar is the goddess of loss, of darkness, you could say, and other things, depending on what story you're reading or interacting with. And Lathander, who's the god of the sun and brightness, and many other things. They are tricked to genuinely falling in love. Ao, the overgod, as one might expect, does not like that. And so the premise of this story is that Ao imprisons Lathander here in the Shining Citadel, in the Shadowfell, and imprisons Shar in Everwatch, which is Helm's Hold. And by doing so, causes the Shadowfell and the material plane, because the gods aren't doing their jobs, to start to bleed together. So in order to stop that, the crusade has to free them both simultaneously. So obviously one major tip of the spear is the entire point of this crusade is to make it to the ferry in Harakir, to make it to the Shining Citadel, and then somehow free Lathander, right? So from a story standpoint, that being the North Star, there are all of these, I think I put 12 in here. Someone can count that for me if they feel like it. 12 different domains of dread that they may have to go through, because obviously if this isn't really mapped in real life, you're not going to see this. So I invented these rules, which you can see here. I kind of tried to 4x so that you could essentially have your armies and your tokens, and you can see this actually on Roll20. I'll show it right here. They had to uncover each of these areas bit by bit. It was actually really cool. So in this video game context, you would be given stories in a similar Helldivers II sense, where you could choose from various missions. All of these missions, or the vast majority of them, are going to contain both combat and role-playing elements. So again, let's say the army is deciding to move into Markovia, right? Or, any of these places. Actually, the one that I wanted to go, they're initially going to do is in Bluetspur, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. That is actually, I'm pretty sure the Violet Hold is held by this Illithid faction. So let's say that we have to invade this Illithid faction, and it's a tough slog, but we make it to the portal of Inzan. In the portal of Inzan, let's say that you chose that mission, you fought your way through Illithids and their spawn and their allies, and you get to the portal itself, right? That, I think, is instructive of the type of role playing that I would love in this game, where let's say the portal is forcibly open and it brings in, every, X hours, a Y amount of Illithids in their spawn and their army, right? Or could summon, like in the Baldur's Gate 3 context, perhaps an Elder Brain to hit, help them in their war effort. And your job is to close it. To me, that could be combat, depending on how the role playing goes with the portal. I think that is part of what is special about D&D, is the GM has such power to craft it. So the GM of this game, hint, hint, please give me the job, I think would have this enormous flexibility of profound storytelling at this portal and the myriad other points of interest, where you can, as a party, vote and choose and uncover all of these things all over the map. I just think it would be amazing. So let's say the portal itself is sentient, right? The Illithid and their insanity have created a sentient portal. So there would be maybe two different resolution paths where, let's say you're kind of the lawful good paladin type. You could convince it to close itself for the greater good. Or let's say you're more of the lawful evil type. You could convince it to close out of its own self-interest. Or perhaps You're just saying you're like a mid-scale good. You're evil. You know, you attack it, right, and then you have to defeat them. Whatever it is, you do it, and depending on what paths you choose, you get various items, equipment, magic items, whatever it is that helps enhance your character, and of course the cause as a whole. And then when you complete these missions, again, very much like Helldivers 2, you contribute to the overall war effort. In the case that I just mentioned, you know, the taking of Blitz. And then as that meter reaches its apex, there's going to be community boss fights, which I think which is really one of the main things I think is missing, you know, these days from Helldivers. It's not really boss fights. It's just as you get harder, there's a billion more enemies, and I think that loses its charm and nuance after a while. In this case, you would want to fight like really powerful Illithid, potentially even, you know, the King Illithid over there, whose name I forget and I apologize. But there would be so many opportunities like that, right? So again, just to recap role-playing, let's reorient around these domains of dread, their incredible uniqueness, the areas, the leaders, the special effects, you know, the terrain, the points of interest, right? And again, the key here is role-playing, decision-making, right? And dealing with the positive and negative consequences of those choices. That's role-playing. And I think that would take a game with already special and really fun and innovative combat to a whole nother level, I think, of success and popularity, both financially and I think, you know, critically, which is important in this day and age, right? Okay, let's transition to the live service, right? And this is where I think, again, Helldivers 2 deserves an incredible amount of accolades, right? So what their live service is they have the entire community tackling objectives as a community, right? So in Helldivers, there are two, right now anyway, in the filming in May 1st, 2024, they have the bug planets, the terminids, and they have you know, the bots, right? And you can go to planets. Each planet is unique, and you fight in different missions. You all want to launch the nuke. In this case, you know, there would be war progress. As the game launches, you know, we'd be much closer to the portal. We'd be conquering little territory. But the reason why I think this could be successful from a live service is this is a long war. Like, taking the domains of dread from the dark forces is a ridiculously difficult undertaking. And depending on how the community succeeds and what their choices are, I think there's an opportunity in the main command in Citadel Raven, kind of like what they did in Dragon Age 3, actually, where you have the war table. Something like that, where the community can interact and see and feel like they're an intimate part of the war progress as the Shadowfell gets taken and we explore new territory, enter new domains of dread, all of which, like I said, are highly unique. So again, you're going to be able to choose your deployments, see your special scenarios, which again have both combat and role playing. And I think there's going to be community actions, community achievements, which I think are going to continue to take it to the next level. If the community comes together, and let's say we defeat Strahd and Barovia in the final battle of Barovia, right? The community should get some epic special reward that they can deploy. So whether it's like in the final boss sequence of Baldur's Gate 3, where you can like summon allies to battle, or you're getting, honestly, literally the Carson with the Staff of the Magi, Ring of Invisibility, but like something akin to that, those rewards are going to anchor you in where were you when Barovia fell, right? Can you imagine? Like, this game would be outrageously awesome. And I don't think I'm crazy in saying that. I'm not necessarily right all the time. I'm not even necessarily right most of the time. But I think I'm right about this. This game would be absolutely special. Again, it's called Stolen Sunrise is the name of the campaign. Think about it, you know, Lathander is stolen, and so is Shar. And if these worlds are melding into another, the way the sun rises and falls is going to be profoundly different as they continue to mesh, hence Stolen Sunrise. I think this game would be absolutely incredible. I think the community would rally around it. I think if it was built properly. Now, who could make this? I would like to make it. I don't have the resources that Arrowhead does, but I think if you took some old BioWare OGs, gave a ton of resources to Arrowhead, and picked off some people from Larian that were special, you could make it. This game could come to exist. Again, I volunteer to be the GM. I did this before. I could do it again. Selfishly, I just want to see this game get made and just be exactly what the community deserves. And again, this is a tabletop role-playing game channel, yes, but again, it's also a collaborative story channel. And this type of game, the Stolen Sunrise game, would be one hell of a collaborative story if hundreds of thousands of people were fighting in Barovia. Can you imagine? Or, you know, the pirate fleet of Saragosse. Oh my gosh, I can't even, I don't want to get too fired up, but you get my point, right? So again, as part of this video, I'm going to link the Shadowfell map if you want to use it for your campaign. Again, it's intensely mediocre. I am no Incarnate expert, but I did play Age of Wonders 1, and I did use their map editor, and I used whatever little skills I had to create this map. But there are people on Incarnate that would make this look like a joke. I've seen some experts on Incarnate that could make this look incredible. And if you're turning this into sort of an overall map that the community uncovers and explores and succeeds with together, and you had real artists, it would be special. This would be a special game. And not only would I be first in line to buy, I'd be first in line to help make it. So whatever I can do, I would love to be a part of it. So Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast, you've seen what financial and critical success and community support has come from studios with the right level of resources, the right level of license, right? The right level of talent and leadership when they come together and they do justice to the Forgotten Realms. The Forgotten Realms is straight up one of the most special and awesome settings in fiction right now, and it is being deeply underserved compared to the overall potential of what it could be. So let's make this Stolen Sunrise game, and I think you're going to find the community would rally pretty hard. And I will do my extremely small part to help that to the extent it's development. But that's pretty much it, everybody. So if this is a game that you would like, let us know in the comments. If I'm completely off base, then I'm a complete moron. You can let me know too, but who has time for negativity in 2024? We gotta be uplifting each other. But anyway, I appreciate everyone's time. Thanks so much for watching, and let's get this game made. Let's do it.